So it does appear that Felipe Baby has gone ahead with his intentions to sue Formula One, Bernie Ecclestone and the FIA, all for what went down at the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix. And this was all filed with a court in London on Monday. So just checking the date, the 11th of March 2024. Now some thought it would never go this far, but clearly it has. The date was on the other screen. And this is something that I've looked at a couple of times before, and I think I did mention if it all came around again, I would look into it, because it's always important to get all the details necessary and then get it out to you. And people want to know what I think. And I'd rather give you what's what and then expand on it, rather than sensationalise everything and then in the process get it all wrong, because I need to be first, I need those clicks, make me lots of money, YouTube algorithm. Although a lot of money would be nice. And the initial blow up of all this happened back in the April of last year, and then cropped up again in September. At least, that's what YouTube Studio is saying in regards to my previous two videos on the subject. And the two videos were so far apart, I even changed Studio in the middle. I am going to try my best to not just repeat stuff that I said in those other two videos, because I want to try and get the new stuff out, or just add some extra bits that I never really mentioned the last time we went over this, because now it's a lot more real. It's like the other stuff that comes with it, like opening up a can of worms that sees this happen and this happen and this happen, and then suddenly you've got this massive thing. So, with that all said and done, I mean, it is just what it is, let's go over this one final time. Like I say, this all has to do with what happened at Singapore in 2008, with a massive hurricane of piss being whipped up when, in 2009, just after being sacked by Renault, Nelson Piquet Jr. spoke to Brazilian media saying that he was told prior to that Singapore Grand Prix that he needed to deliberately crash his car so that Alonso, who had had a rubbish qualifying session, could use the safety car procedure caused to then get further up in the race order. This is probably a video I need to do again at some point. It was one of the very early episodes of Storytime, because it is quite interesting, and now we have loads more information available to us. Basically, Alonso pitted just before the Piquet crash, which looked a bit odd, and Martin Brundle saw its convenience there and then. During the pit stops that came in that safety car period, Massa came in, filled up with fuel, took some new tyres, and as he left, he ripped the fuel hose clean off the fueling rig, and it was still attached to his car. Ferrari were using a sort of prototype version of the traffic light system that they are all now using today, as opposed to the lollipop man that they were using before. And there was that awkward moment where he had to sit at the end of the pit lane and wait for someone to come and retrieve it. Anyhow, this is where a lot of people point to the moment when Massa lost the title. A lot more people will point to him spinning no fewer than 5 times at Silverstone, this being when Hamilton went on and put a wet weather masterclass and took a huge victory, given that at the time Hamilton was being railroaded in the press and needed to pull his finger out to rescue his championship. Hamilton won the race, and it's now on the list of best wet weather drives, although you can agree or disagree with that at your leisure. Massa finished last and out of the points. However, there are going to be other people who know more about facts and stats and other bits and pieces who will point out that Massa also crashed on the opening lap in Australia, with his engine failing later on in that race. He spun off at Malaysia, had the utter merit Silverstone that we've just discussed, and also hit Hamilton at Fuji and got a penalty, while Hamilton still needed to serve one that he'd been given for an incident on the opening lap. And then there was the engine failure at Hungary that, okay, that was sheer bad luck. Now, the engine failure at Australia might also be bad luck, but at the same time, he might have damaged it, cranking it up to 11 to try and catch back up. And I hadn't originally written it all in, but I thought I'd put it in afterwards just for the interest of balance. Hamilton had his fair share of driver errors too, chief among which being the embarrassing crash in the pit lane at Montreal, for which he had to serve a 10-place grid penalty at the French Grand Prix. There's also a penalty he picked up for driving too slow and impeding Heusinkveld at Malaysia, bogged down bigly at the start in Bahrain and lost positions, the incorrect tyre choice at Italy, and messing up the first corner at Fuji, which got him the penalty. But the 2008 season as a whole is one that is full of twists, turns, ups and downs. Bleacher Report reckons that Hamilton lost over 20 points just from stewards' decisions, a chunk of those 20 points coming from what happened in Belgium. Massa lost over 20 points from driver error, but lost more through unreliability and the Ferrari breaking down. But Spa 2008 is a video I've done a dedicated video on, so I won't bore you with all the details. This is more about what is happening now, and my opinions on the facts that have been presented in the last 2 days or so. So Massa wants to sue Formula One, FOM, Formula One Management, and Bernie Ecclestone for what happened in Singapore. And this was all filed, like I said, with a court in London on Monday. Why London? I don't know. Maybe that's because that's where FOM was based, or because Bernie's English, or whatever it might be. But anyway, this was all kicked off because what happened in April last year when Bernie gave an interview to a German racing magazine or online site thing, where he said that they knew what had happened there and then, but they didn't act on it. Bernie said in this interview that he and Mosley were aware of what was going on but couldn't act on it. He later added, "We wanted to protect the sport and save it from a huge scandal," which, given what had happened just 12 months prior with the toxicity between McLaren and Alonso, and the fact that someone working at a Kinko's dobbed McLaren into Ferrari, and the $100 million fines that came after that, Formula One didn't need all of that again. At least, that's what Bernie must have been thinking. It's bad for business, after all. I still feel sorry for Massa today. He won the final in his home race in Sao Paulo and did everything right. He was robbed of the title he deserved while Hamilton had all the luck in the world and won his first championship. Today I would have settled it differently. That's why for me Michael Schumacher is still the sole record holder, even if the statistics say otherwise. But later in the September of 2023, Bernie told Reuters that he didn't remember doing that interview. While at the time the news broke it was all about Massa getting things overturned and the championship being made his after that Bernie interview, it seems now that the bare minimum is getting a settlement from Formula One, FOM and the FIA for the money that Massa would have made as the Formula One World Champion of 2008. He's suing to the tune of $80 million US, which is in the region of £62.5 million. Although some sources are saying that he's after $150 million, so take that how you will. Massa has, since Bernie mentioned that he and Max knew something was up, claimed that he is the rightful champion and seeks to get some compensation. And I do feel a little bit of sympathy for him because he would have won the World Championship at his home Grand Prix, a track he was so local to that as a kid he was selling programs and hot dogs and other bits and pieces to earn a few quid, or whatever the Brazilian currency is. So he loses the World Championship and the opportunity to be the first Brazilian champion since Senna at his home Grand Prix, because of just divine intervention, if you want to call it that. The last corner of the last lap, all because Glock had stayed out on dry tyres when it was chucking it down. If the rain had come 30 seconds later, things probably would have been different. But the thing is, he then learns 15 years later that the people in charge knew something was iffy with that race. In the same time period, the guy he lost the World Championship to became the biggest star in the sport, ended up winning another 6 titles, and ended up smashing nearly every record in sight when it came to wins and pole positions. So, yeah, all of that's happened while, after that race, Massa never won a race again. Massa's lawyer said, Mr. Massa also seeks damages for the significant financial loss he has suffered due to the FIA's failure, in which Mr. Eccleston and FOM were also complicit. As Mr. Eccleston has admitted, there was enough information in time to investigate the matter in 2008 and cancel the race in Singapore. Mr. Eccleston further affirmed that, had the results of the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix been cancelled, Felipe Massa would have become the world champion, and that Mr. Massa was cheated out of the title he deserved. Attempts to find an amicable resolution have been unsuccessful, leaving Mr. Massa with no choice but to initiate legal proceedings. He went on to say, recent events naturally demonstrate that issues of transparency and integrity in Formula One remain relevant, and it is clear that serious work is needed to restore its credibility and long-term future. I'm assuming there he's referring to the recent Christian Horner allegations, as well as the stuff that came out saying that Mohammed Ben Sulayem had allegedly told stewards to throw out a penalty given to Alonso in Saudi Arabia last year, as well as the allegations that he tried to make sure that the Vegas GP circuit didn't get certified in time. But yesterday, speaking to the Daily Express, Bernie said that Massa was right to sue. Now, is that an admission of guilt? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But cue the comments saying that Bernie doesn't like Hamilton and wants to strip him of that title so he's no longer equal with Michael. But like I said at the time when I first did a video on this, there is only ever going to be one side of that argument, at least from Formula One side. We aren't ever going to get a testimony from Mosley because he died a few years ago. So does that leave Bernie's word versus everybody else's? Because it's not just Max that's no longer around. Race director Charlie Whiting died in 2019, so 2 of the 3 key witnesses on the FIA side aren't going to be able to give their side. Now, I really am trying to not just repeat what was said in the first video in this now trilogy of Massa lawsuit videos, but there is a lot of crossover here. For instance, back when I did the original video, we were all talking and joking about how Damon can then sue for 94, or Prost can sue for 1990, and then everything just expands ever outward, to my own joke input of the 1966 German football team suing for Jeff Hurst's goal that never crossed the line, then the English Football Association countersuing for Frank Lampard's goal in 2010, which did cross the line. Still salty about that. But one thing I did think about yesterday when I was trying to put together extra arguments and points and bits and pieces for this video, I began thinking about the point that some others have made, that if Singapore was written off, then the other teams would have raced maybe a little bit differently to how it actually went. Because if you go on Wikipedia now and just delete Singapore and then adjust the points accordingly, that assumes that the rest of the season went exactly the way it did. But we don't know that. Can you see where I'm coming from with that point? I hope so. So I thought about the possible implications of teams involved in the 2008 Formula 1 World Championship to go, well, if you void Singapore, we drop points to the teams we were fighting with, and then they finish ahead of us as a result. We didn't know this was going to be the case at that time. Or another team going, if you void this race, then we drop points to the team that was ahead of us, if you can follow me on that. But since none of the teams would actually lose out in terms of championship position if you delete the points from Singapore, then really that's not much of an issue. What I'm thinking is, at most, if there is a positive outcome from this, then Massa will get his money from an out-of-court settlement. The case probably isn't going to go away until it's settled either inside the courtroom or outside the courtroom. And then where that can lead not just for Formula 1 or other motorsports under the FIA's umbrella. I mean, Schumacher was thrown out of the championship for deliberately crashing into Villeneuve, or at least that was what the FIA perceived at Jerez in 1997. With Schumacher in 1997, though, there are other things you have to take into account, key among which being that all of Schumacher's stats were kept. Points, wins, podiums, by extension trophies as well. So when you see 91 wins next to Schumacher's name, that's not minused from 1997, if you follow me. Same for points, same for podiums. So everything is still there on his records. He hasn't been completely expunged from 1997, and everybody else moved around accordingly. The other thing is, the decision on Schumacher was made in the November of 1997, almost exactly a month prior to the FIA prize giving, whereupon Jacques Villeneuve got his championship trophy thing, and in the FIA's words, everything is finalised. So, yeah. If you take Alonso now and say, right, we're going to remove Alonso from the standings, that does open a big can of worms. So let's assume that they do decide that Alonso and Renault must be disqualified from the Singapore standings for race fixing. This moves Rosberg into a winning position. It moves Hamilton into second. Therefore, Hamilton wins the championship by more than that 1 point he won it by in real life, and Williams finishes equal on points with Red Bull as a result. And Williams finishes equal on points with Red Bull, but above Red Bull in the final standings, thanks to Rosberg's win. So then Williams will be entitled to more of a Constructors' Championship payout. They will be entitled to Red Bull's share of the pot, and they'll probably sue for that. See how much carnage this can cause if things go a certain way? And while this case hasn't been as in your face as it was almost a year ago, it's still one we should probably keep an eye on. But I'd like to know what you think, knowing that in this instance it's just the money rather than the result that it's been sued for. Should that be enough, or should they go the whole hog? Or will it go to potentially overturning the final result of the championship if things don't go the way the legal team wants it to? So then, a look at what's been said now that Felipe Massa's legal team has formally sued the FIA, FOM and F1 for what happened at Singapore in 2008. If this thing has made you think things about the thing, then like this thing so the algorithm can do its thing. And for more things like this, subscribe and get the bell thing on so you never miss out on anything else I do around here. Massive thanks as ever to the rad lads at Patreon, and if you want to help keep things running around here, then a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to Discord, socials and other bits and pieces you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks and memberships if you're into that sort of thing. So until next time, I've been Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.